I was 19 when I learned that love in my family was transactional. Not about kindness, not about loyalty, just about what I could provide. It was a blazing July afternoon in Phoenix when my father barged into my tiny room, waving a loan application in one hand and his phone calculator in the other. "Your brother found the perfect condo," he announced, voice dripping with false cheer. "He just needs a cosigner. That's you." I stared at him, sweat trickling down my back. "I'm 19, I said. My mother's voice floated in from the kitchen. "Exactly, Mia. You've got no debt, perfect credit, you're useful right now." They'd always talked around me like that, as if I were a spreadsheet, not a daughter. I hesitated. What if Theo doesn't pay? Dad's smile vanished. His eyes hardened, his jaw tightening like concrete. "Stop being dramatic. This is what family does." "He's already maxed out 2 credit cards in my name," I whispered, my hands trembling. My mother stormed into the room then, fury burning in her eyes. "Ungrateful child, we've sacrificed everything for you. We feed you, clothe you, and you act like some martyr. Who do you think raised you?" "You did," I murmured, "but that doesn't mean I should ruin my life for him." And in that single moment, everything shifted. By midnight, I was gone. No warning, no teary goodbyes. Just me, my battered suitcase, and a message on my phone. "If you're too good for us, don't come back." For 3 weeks, I crashed in the cramped laundry room of my best friend Layla's apartment in Tempe. No AC, no real bed, just the hum of washers and a thin yoga mat on the floor. But for the first time, I could breathe. I wasn't flinching at every door slam. I wasn't rehearsing every word I spoke. I took night shifts at a greasy diner off the I-10 and enrolled in online classes during the day. Some days I felt like a ghost drifting through the desert heat, surviving on bad coffee and dollar tacos. But I refused to be the disappointment my parents always predicted I'd become. I hunted scholarships like my life depended on it. Because it did. I barely slept. But every acceptance letter felt like proof I existed beyond their demands. Meanwhile, Theo splashed photos all over Instagram, smiling poolside at resorts, showing off new sneakers, posing with cocktails under neon lights. Each post felt like a slap, a reminder that my parents had chosen his comfort over my entire existence. I didn't see my parents again until 5 years later. I'd just been awarded a full scholarship to transfer to the University of Washington. I was working brunch at a trendy cafe in downtown Seattle when I spotted them slipping through the door. My mother wore gold hoops and a silk blouse, looking like she'd stepped off a cruise ship. My father carried himself like a man who'd never shouted me out of the house. "Mia," Mom cried, her voice all brittle brightness. "We knew you'd wind up somewhere nice like this." They didn't sit. They didn't order a coffee. Instead, Dad handed me a crisp envelope. Inside was a letter. A polite demand for $28,000, 0 cents to pay off a Range Rover they'd leased. For Theo. "You owe it to your brother," my mother hissed, her red nails clutching my wrist. I stared at them, my apron dusted in flour, my fingers stiff from pouring endless lattes. "You kicked me out for refusing to sign my name for him once," I said quietly. "Why would I do it now?" My father scowled, leaning closer. "Because we're family, and family comes through." I took off my apron, folded it neatly, and laid it on the counter. "Family doesn't throw you away like garbage. Tell Theo to sell his Range Rover." My mother's eyes went wide, like she couldn't comprehend disobedience from the girl she'd raised. And for the first time in years, I felt taller than both of them. I turned and walked back into the kitchen, letting the letter flutter to the floor like the worthless paper it was. Outside, Seattle's rain drizzled against the cafe windows. I felt the cool air on my face and realized I didn't owe them anything. Not my credit, not my future, not even my presence. And that finally felt like freedom. "You abandoned him when he needed you," my father growled. "I was living in a laundry room," I shot back. He leaned closer across the cafe's narrow counter. "Well, you look like you're doing okay now." That was the moment I made a vow. Whatever I built, they'd never benefit from a single cent of it. I hustled through community college, scraping by on scholarships and midnight diner shifts. I interned without pay, lived out of duffel bags, skipped meals more often than I care to admit. And then I landed an entry-level job at a boutique firm specializing in aviation finance. I was 24, sleeping 5 hours a night, learning everything I could about how planes and the deals behind them flew. Within 5 years, I'd built my own consulting company in Seattle, working with small charter operators and private buyers. By my 6th year, I bought my first small jet outright, paid in full, no loans, no handouts. On the 11th anniversary of the night my parents threw me out, I returned to Phoenix for the first time since leaving. But this time, I arrived in my own jet. They didn't recognize me right away. Not until the door of the sleek white Learjet swung open and I stepped onto the tarmac in a navy jumpsuit and heels they couldn't afford even if they sold their house. Their jaws dropped. But I hadn't come back to talk. I was there to collect something they'd forgotten they owed me a long time ago. Respect. Phoenix hadn't changed much. Same faded stucco buildings. Same cracked sidewalks shimmering under brutal sun. Same whispers drifting behind half-closed blinds. But I wasn't the same 19-year-old girl they'd thrown out with a single suitcase and a voicemail telling me not to come back. I wasn't here for nostalgia, I was here for a fundraiser. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who'd said I'd never amount to anything were now gathering to raise money to save the failing community arts center, the one that had kept me sane during my childhood. My old high school gym had been transformed into an event space. Gold balloons, folding chairs, cheap plastic champagne flutes catching the overhead lights. And at the front of the room, standing under a paper banner reading, "Save Our Center," were my parents. They didn't know who'd funded the entire evening, not until the MC stepped up to the microphone. This fundraiser has been made possible by the generous support of our special guest, Miss Mia Alvarado. There was a hush. Then a ripple of gas. I watched my mother freeze, her eyes wide, hand clamped over her pearl necklace. My father dropped his glass, golden bubbles fizzing across the gym floor. I strode onto the stage, heels clicking like applause, wearing a sleek navy jumpsuit that shimmered under the lights. The spotlight followed me, sharp and hot against my skin, like a long overdue acknowledgement. I didn't look at my parents. Not yet. Instead, I looked at the kids scattered in the folding chairs. Kids who looked like me all those years ago. Small, anxious, hoping someone would tell them they mattered. I took a breath. I grew up in this town, I said, my voice steady, and I was told I was selfish because I wouldn't give up everything for people who only offered love with conditions. I was told I'd fail if I didn't stay silent and obedient. I paused, turned my head slowly until my eyes locked with my parents in the front row. They were wrong. Silence hung for a moment, brittle and sharp. Then the applause exploded around me. The only two people not clapping were my mother and father. After the event, I stepped off the stage and moved through the crowd of neighbors, teachers, and old classmates pressing in to congratulate me. My parents cornered me near the refreshments table, between the punch bowl and a platter of warm Costco cookies. "Mia," my mother said, her voice trembling, her painted smile wobbling. That speech was dramatic. I smiled, cool and unwavering. "Thanks. It was honest." If you're as curious as the whispers still echoing through my hometown, hit subscribe and join me for the next chapter. Because this story isn't over yet. "You humiliated us," my father hissed, voice low but sharp as shattered glass, "in front of the whole damn city." I looked him straight in the eye. "You threw me out when I was 19 because I refused to co-sign a loan. And then you came crawling back, asking me to pay off a car I've never even sat in." My mother rolled her eyes, scoffing. "Mia, it was just a Range Rover. It wasn't even brand new." I blinked at her. "Do you hear yourself?" That's when her mask slipped. Her voice softened, brittle around the edges. "Look, we're behind on the mortgage. Your father's pension didn't come through." Dad swallowed hard. "We thought, well, now that you're doing so well, maybe you could help us out a bit." I laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just tired. You made your choice 11 years ago, I said. You chose Theo's comfort over my safety. You laughed while I slept on a yoga mat next to a washing machine. You haven't changed. You've just run out of money. My mother reached for my arm, her fingers trembling. Mia, please. We're your family. I pulled away. No, I was your backup plan. And now, I'm your last resort. I left them standing in that echoing high school hallway, mouths open, hands empty. But the story wasn't finished. 3 days later, my attorney served them papers. The house they were so desperate to save, the house they'd begged me to help keep, didn't actually belong to them anymore. 6 months prior, their mortgage had quietly slipped into default. One of my investment companies, hidden behind layers of LLCs and shell corporations, had purchased the property outright at auction. They never saw it coming. I gave them 30 days to vacate. And as poetic as it sounds, it wasn't revenge. It was about reclaiming power, the power they stripped away from me the day they left me on a doorstep with nothing but a suitcase and silence. It was about making sure that the girl they'd abandoned never again questioned if she was worth loving. And just as they'd once slammed a door on me, I closed one behind them, only this time, it was marble and gold, not peeling wood and chipped paint. The day they left the house, I stood across the street, shielded behind tinted windows. They shuffled out carrying duffel bags and plastic bins. My mother's face was pale as chalk. My father leaned on a borrowed cane, his eyes empty. They stood on the front lawn, staring at the house as though it had betrayed them. But it hadn't. I had simply reclaimed what was always meant to be mine. The day I flew back to Phoenix in my private jet wasn't supposed to be dramatic. I hadn't planned it to be a spectacle. But life has a way of bringing you full circle, of offering moments that echo every cruel "you'll never make it," every door slammed shut, every tear you swallowed in secret. My jet touched down just beyond the dusty regional airport. As I stepped onto the stairway, the sun hit my crisp white suit and sent the metal trim of my sunglasses blazing. My heels tapped the metal steps like punctuation marks, announcing a brand new chapter. Waiting near the small terminal were a crowd of reporters, a handful of old classmates craning their necks for a glimpse, and even the mayor of Phoenix himself. I had funded half of the airport's renovation under an alias. Today was the ribbon-cutting ceremony. But I knew they'd come, and they did. My parents stood just outside the terminal doors. My mother wore a sagging beige cardigan that hung on her like an apology. My father leaned on that same borrowed cane, eyes sunken, looking like he hadn't slept in days. They hadn't handled the eviction well. I paused at the bottom of the jet steps, feeling the heat of the Arizona sun soak through my suit. I took off my sunglasses and looked directly at them. And in that single breath, I knew. I had survived. Apparently, they'd tried staying with my father's cousin in Mesa, but that lasted 3 days. Then came the calls. Then the emails. Then silence. Until now. I moved past the cameras, past the applause, and straight toward them, heels ticking across the pavement in the afternoon sun. Please, my mother whispered, her voice so faint it was barely there. We're sorry. I arched an eyebrow. Sorry, for what? For kicking me out? For telling the entire family I was a selfish ingrate? For calling me ungrateful because I refused to ruin my credit to pay for Theo's condo? My father coughed into his fist. We thought eventually you'd come around. I did, I said evenly, just not the way you expected. My mother shuffled a step closer. Her cardigan sleeves hung past her wrists. Mia, we're homeless. I studied her face, thin and lined, and felt a flicker of something. Maybe pity, but it vanished like a mirage in desert heat. You're still better off than I was at 19, I said quietly. At least you have each other. Her mouth twisted, desperation clinging to her words. You'd really leave your own parents on the street? I sighed and reached into my leather handbag. I pulled out a sleek black envelope and pressed it into her trembling hands. She blinked, frowning, and slipped out the card inside. It read, "The Alvarado Center for Abandoned Youth. Coming soon. Fully funded by Mia Alvarado. In loving memory of second chances." My mother looked up, bewildered. "There's a spot reserved for you," I said. "Not in the shelter itself. In the volunteer office." Her brow furrowed. "You want us to work at a homeless shelter?" "No," I replied calmly. "I want you to know what it feels like to be invisible, to be judged, to wonder if you matter. The way you made me feel." My father's jaw flexed, hard enough to crack stone. "This is your idea of punishment. It's my idea of justice." My mother crumpled the black card in her fist, eyes bright with tears. "You're still bitter." I gave her a soft, almost gentle smile. "No. I'm healed. Bitter people want revenge. Healed people build empires and let karma handle the rest." I turned away and began walking toward the sleek black car idling by the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the door, but before I climbed in, I turned for one last look at them, standing small and stunned on the sun-bleached pavement. "You taught me how to survive," I said, my voice echoing just enough for them to hear, "by making me believe I couldn't." And then I left. The crowd behind the ropes cheered as the car eased away, but their claps and shouts sounded distant, like echoes bouncing off canyon walls. Because inside I was thinking about the terrified 19-year-old girl who once sat on a curb outside a gas station in Tempe, sobbing, under a flickering neon sign, with no money, no phone, and no one in the world who cared whether she lived or died. That girl deserved justice. And she finally got it. Today, I wasn't just Mia Alvarado, the woman in designer sunglasses stepping off private jets. I was living proof that being thrown out doesn't mean you stay down. And the door I'd walked out of all those years ago? That was only the beginning. I've fought to turn my pain into power, and I know I'm not the only one out there carrying old scars. If my story resonates with you, hit subscribe so we can keep walking this road together. Drop me a comment, tell me what battles you've faced or how you rose above them. Remember, you're never defined by where you started or who tried to keep you small. Build your own runway, even if you have to pour the concrete yourself. And if someone tells you you'll never make it, smile and let your victories speak for you.